Sorcery for Beginners, a simple help guide to a challenging and arcane art. Book 1 of the Codex Arcanum by Euphemia Whitmore with Mad Harry. 500 years ago, magic began to fade from the world. Combustion engines and computers replaced enchanted plows and spellbooks. Real sorcerers were hunted almost to extinction. Science became the primary system of belief, and the secrets of spellcasting were forgotten. Until now. Chapter 1. If you're reading this, you have been selected. You are now a candidate to fight in a war that has waged for centuries. A war between soldiers and spellcasters. Guns against magic. Science versus sorcery. You see, around 500 years ago, sorcery began to disappear from the world. Steam engines and computers took the place of enchanted farm tools and spellbooks. Magical seers were replaced by Google. Science became the primary system of belief, and the secrets of spellcastings were forgotten. But sorcery isn't gone. The energy used by spellcasters, the same power that can transform matter, control the elements, and compel creatures, is still out there. It is waiting to be harnessed, like a wild unicorn running through a wood. We need only to find an innocent maid, lure the horned beast into a net of finely woven gold, tie ourselves to its back with unbreakable chains, preferably encircled silver, then hang on like grim death until it grants us a wish. Easy. But perhaps you're intimidated by such arcane procedures. Perhaps with your worldwide webs and cellular pocket phones and instant everything, you find it difficult to absorb the intricacies of a 3,000-year-old art. Happily, there's a solution. This book is the first to design to teach the modern young person ancient and complicated studies in a fun, entertaining manner. Complex ideas are broken down and explored through the colorful illustrations, instructions, and informative sidebars in 3 delightful categories. Most importantly, Sorcery for Beginners is no longer presented in adult textbook-style format. No, 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 no. Instead, spellcasting is introduced through the absolutely true tale of one young magician in training named Owen Macready. By his example, new readers will learn the 3 aspects of all enchantments, the 12 basic incantations, how to duel with more experienced magic practitioners, and the true power behind all great sorcerers. I'll give you a hint though, it's not power. By reading onward, you are electing to join the battle, to learn sorcery and use it responsibly, to defend magic from those who would suppress, destroy, or subjugate the arcane arts. If that sounds like too much for you, go no further. But if you're still here, let the fun begin. Volume 1 on the finding and usage of magic spellbooks. Russian Runner. Snow fell on St. Petersburg as the young sorceress ran for her life. It was a January evening in the Russian city, just past 1 a.m. The city's colorful buildings and onion domes glinted in the cold light of a nearly full moon. At this hour, the streets were mostly empty, save for the occasional late-night Trotsky seeker or insomniac. Had anyone looked out their frosted bedroom window, they would have been surprised to see the running young woman for 2 reasons. Number 1, the girl was without a jacket or hat, which was highly unusual for anyone in St. Petersburg at that time of year. And 2, there seemed to be nothing, or rather no one, chasing her. Still, she ran. She was a pale Russian teenager of 14 years, tall for her age and reedy, like an icy cattail caught in a winter storm. She wore a blue and white gingham blouse with a dark navy ankle-length skirt, the hem of which was coated in slush, Large round eyeglasses slid down her nose as she ran. A wispy blonde braid swung wildly across her back. Her breath caught in a frantic, icy puff. Clutched to her chest was a weighted up quilt. The sorceress didn't break her stride as she glanced over her shoulder. The streets were empty, and the air hushed with snowfall. And yet, she must have seen something, because a ragged cry of fear broke from her throat. She attempted to increase her speed, turning down a narrow cobblestone alleyway. The leather heel of her shoe slipped on a wet stone, but she managed to keep her balance and continue moving. At the far end of the alleyway, she skidded to a stop. Her exhaled breath created great clouds of vapor, obscuring her face. With one hand, she removed her glasses and wiped the condensation on her quilt. Then she scanned her surroundings. Directly before the sorceress was the palace square, a massive open area the size of 5 soccer fields. The square's only defining feature was a 47-meter-high red granite spire known as the Alexander Column. Behind that was the Winter Palace, a gorgeous 18th-century building of white and azure, accented at symmetrical intervals with gold paint. With its current dusting of fresh snow, it looked like a particularly large and expensive wedding cake. The young woman had no time to appreciate architecture, however. Her desperate eyes scanned the length of the square until they landed on what seemed to be running this whole time: the blue and white symbol of a Russian police outpost. She took a deep breath and sprinted straight toward the glowing sign. She made only 10 steps into the square before her foot caught a patch of ice and fell to the ground. The bundle in her arms unfurled, sending a heavy rectangular object skidding across the snow-dusted stone. It was a book. A thick tome of yellowed parchment, bound in a rich brown leather and stamped in gold lettering. The kind of book one usually sees locked in a glass case at a museum, with a tiny placard explaining how old and rare it is. Even in the dim light of the palace square, it was clear this book was even more old and rare than any of those. The young woman got to her feet, desperate to retrieve her treasure. She had barely taken a step when a circle of white light illuminated the book. A spotlight. It shone from a helicopter hovering 50 meters above the square. Spotlight on spellcraft. There was a whizzing sound, and black nylon ropes hit the ground. The sorceress watched, terrified, as 3 men in dark military garb descended from the helicopter. In their hands were M5 automatic rifles, the sort favored by particularly bloodthirsty mercenaries. On each of their right shoulders was a white and black insignia, a compass, and a flaming torch bisected by a squat cross. The cross was similar to those she'd seen on the shields of medieval knights, but these men were knights in the same way that African lions are a kind of house cat. They touched ground, forming a line that blocked her way forward. One of them spoke. "I don't get the running. You knew we had a helicopter." The sorceress ignored him and ran for the book that lay between them. The mercenaries lifted their rifles. The young woman bent the fingers of both hands into 3 complicated positions. They gave a single clap. A crack of thunder echoed across the square, rattling the windows of the Winter Palace. The concussive blast knocked the 3 adults right off their feet, and if they were little more than paper cutouts in a gale force wind, their weapons went flying. They hit the ground several meters away and lay still for a moment, dazed even. The sorceress tossed aside the quilt and ran forward, scooping up the book. She continued toward the police sign, which was still several hundred meters off. The mercenary closest to her rolled sideways, his fingers clutching for the slushy hem of her skirt. He managed to grab hold of it, pulling the 14-year-old to the snowy ground. She kicked at him, but her desperate attacks were no match for his battle-hardened strength. He lunged forward to take the book from her. The young woman's fingers sketched a few more patterns in the crisp air. She placed a hand on the adversary's chest, whispering a single word: "Hedfan." The man's feet went up into the air as if tugged by an invisible rope. He let go of the sorceress, frantically scrambling at the wet cobblestone. His body continued upward, rising farther from the ground as if he were filled with helium. He floated by the Alexander column, and as he passed the angel statue that stood atop it, he managed to grab hold of the cross held against the angel's hand. The mercenary hung there, upside down, shouting to his companions for help. By then, the young woman went back and was on her feet, and 2 dozen meters farther down the square. So focused was she on the glowing blue police sign, she had failed to notice that a second mercenary had gotten to his feet and was sprinting toward her. Only when he was 2 meters from her did she hear the slap of his boots on the wet stone. The sorceress spun to face him. She took the book under one arm and swept her fingers through the air in a series of movements. Then she stretched a hand toward the man's face and spoke a sentence in gasping French. Vos es bloqué par un forte dancance de bonbon. A swirl of smoky colored light burst from her hand and wrapped around the man's head like a silk scarf. Red and white candy canes suddenly sprung up before him, jagged and enormous, blocking his path. The soldier skidded to a stop, looking for a way around the peppermint forest, but his search was in vain for two reasons. First, the candy cane obstacle extended indefinitely to either side, and second, there was no forest. Everything he saw existed only in the fog before his eyes, a three-dimensional, picture-perfect glamour. The young woman spared no time to appreciate her spellcraft. She turned and kept running. She was only 15 meters from the police outpost. Once she made it to the door, she and her book would be safe. Her pursuers would not dare risk violence so close to law enforcement. Thwip! A zip sound cut through the hushed air of the palace square. Something knocked the book from under the young woman's arm and sent it spinning to the ground. The sorceress came to a stop. Her heart pounded from her recent exertions, and from the object she saw buried in the book's spine, mere centimeters from where she had been clutching it in her chest. It was a bullet. Bullet time. Slowly the young sorceress turned, raising her hands in the air. 20 meters behind her, the third mercenary pointed his M5 rifle at her heart. He was bigger than his two companions, and had a feline, predatory grace. Keeping the gun steady, he pulled off his combat mask to reveal a handsome face with strong cheekbones and a shaved head. "This is fun and all, but it's getting towards my bedtime," he said, "and there's no way for you to escape." The young woman shivered. For the first time in an hour, she realized how truly cold it was. "Please," she said in a slow, heavy, accented English, "do not shoot me." The bald man kept his gun up and drew closer. "A week ago we asked you nicely to hand over the book. Then we offered to buy it. Now it's a demand. Give it to me. No tricks, or I'll be forced to—" He broke off, pressing a finger to his earbud. "But, sir," he said to the unseen commander, "I can get it without further—" The voice on the other side of the earbud interrupted him with an order. "Yes, sir." The Eleusinian breathed deeply. He tucked his rifle into the hollow of his shoulder. He was only 10 meters from the young woman, the barrel of his gun aimed at her heart. "No, please," the teenager said, her voice wavering in terror. "Take the book. It's yours. Do with it what you like. I'll tell no one, I swear." The bald man spread his hands. "Sorry, kid. Orders are orders." He pulled the trigger. The muzzle flash illuminated his face. The young woman shut her eyes in a death-expected wince. And then time came to a halt. Snowflakes stopped in midair. The bright flare of gunfire stayed fixed and still, like the petals of a glowing flower. Even the bullet froze in place, a pointed gray blur in the air between the mercenary and its target. The silence was immediate and shocking. Only the sorceress still had the ability to move. Noticing the world around her had been placed on pause, she cracked open a single eyelid in surprise. Somehow, someone had actually stopped time and saved her life. She began to laugh in relief when another voice broke through the quiet. "Exactly what sort of idiotic plan was this?" Performance review. A woman stepped from the shadow of the Alexander column. She was in her 60s or 70s and quite attractive, with an elegant, regal quality about her. Her silver hair was swept back and pinned above her pale forehead. A pair of silver-framed spectacles sat upon her aquiline nose. She wore a trim, high-necked blue blouse, a smart dark gray jacket, and a maroon skirt that went to her exquisite ankles. If Shakespeare's Juliet could teach a few torches to burn bright, this woman could make the entire sun blush with envy. "Miss Whitmore," said the young woman, "thank you for saving me. I had troubles." "Troubles are what occur when you spill a teapot or misplace your house keys," the woman named Whitmore said crisply. Her melodious voice was ribboned slightly with a British accent, relinquishing an incredibly powerful guide to sorcery to the very people dedicated to its destruction. "That is a disaster." She looked at the frozen mercenaries with disdain. "I have been observing you for the past hour. I still cannot fathom what your hair-brained intentions here were." The sorceress trailed off. Her voice sounded meek in the deafening quiet. The elegant woman walked forward, leaving a person-shaped hole in the suspended snowflakes. "This time enchantment I've cast will remain itself for quite a while, but I do have other candidates to martyr, you know." "Speak up." The young woman cleared her throat. "I was going to the police for help." "With sorcery?" Miss Whitmore laughed, a full-throated musical sound. "They are lucky to catch ordinary criminals. They would not know where to begin with these well-funded, highly trained murderers." She shook her head at the bald mercenary, who stood like a statue not 2 meters from her, his face illuminated by gunfire. "I thought perhaps they could arrest them. To catch a mouse, one actually needs the cat to be on sight. The police outpost has been closed since 7 p.m. Their hours are right there on the door." The young woman's face burned with embarrassment. "I should have planned better. I apologize." "Not much good in that, is there? Now I shall have to begin the selection process all over again. And meeting new people is so tedious. But I'm afraid there's nothing else for it." Miss Whitmore held out a perfectly manicured hand. "The book, if you please." The young sorceress picked up the tome off the ground, cradling it protectively to her chest. "But you said it was mine." "It was yours, but you failed to protect it now, didn't you? Come, don't deny it. Had I not stopped the clock, you would have given one of the most rarest, most magical texts in the world right over to these dolts, and then been shot. Or perhaps vice versa, but the outcome would have been the same. The secrets of our 3,000-year-old art in the hands of our greatest enemies, all because you did not plan better." With a snap of her fingers, the woman, who still refused to relinquish the book, hesitated. "But I know so much. The spells. I have learned nearly all of them." "You knew the rules. I was quite clear about what would occur if you failed. No, I simply must continue the search for a new candidate." Miss Whitmore sighed, softening her voice a bit. "Look at it this way. You'll be no more worse off now than before we met." Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes, and she shook them away. "But I will. How can I forget that I experienced all this magic?" "On that you need not worry." Gently Miss Whitmore took the tome from the sorceress, tucking it under her right arm. Then the older woman's long fingers began to trace complex patterns in the air, leaving behind sparkly golden trails. "Everything you have encountered in the last few weeks, the book, these men, even sorcery, none of it will concern you after tonight." "You are wrong. These things, for the rest of my life, I will remember." In answer, Miss Whitmore opened her hands. Cupped in her palms was a glowing orb of golden light, roughly the size of an American quarter. It rose into the air like a soap bubble, made a quick orbit around the young woman's head, then came to a stop in front of her. "No," said the older woman, a bit sadly. "No, I'm afraid you won't." The golden orb shot forward, vanishing into the young woman's skull. And on that, ladies and gentlemen, we will stop here. Now, this, from what I was told by my good friend and fellow author Matt Harry, who also co-wrote this with Euphemia Whitmore, is their take on Goonies with a little bit of Harry Potter. Now, I can definitely get the Harry Potter sense from it. And what I also do appreciate about the book, especially in the early chapters, is that Euphemia and Mad Harry added a little bit of history to the books. So, in the first few pages, you learn about St. Petersburg, Alexander's Column, and you also learn a little bit more about the spells as well from Headfan, which is the Welsh word for fly, as well as a glamour, which is a target hallucination created by magic. I really appreciate that it does feel almost like a textbook in a way, that it's a story, but there's also some learning things as well, which also adds to the world building. This was a very fun book to read, and I can't wait to continue reading this book. So, for my good friend and fellow author Matt Harry, this book gets an easy little 5 out of 5. I really like the approach, and it almost reminds me a little bit of the beginning of Men in Black with Tommy Lee Jones's character, who mind wipes his partner in the first movie. I really get that sense here that Miss Whitmore, she's doing everything in her power to find someone who's capable of keeping the secret safe, but is also very powerful and shows promise. So, if you're a fan of sorcery and Goonies and great storytelling and misadventures, then Sorcery for Beginners, Book 1 of the Codex Acronym, is the one for you. I'll be linking it down below in the description of this video, as well as Matt's interview where you can learn more about Sorcery for Beginners, as well as Ashland, the second book that Matt has wrote that's outside of the Sorcery for Beginners series. Until next time, everybody, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you all next time for July. Take care. Bye-bye.